It was June 12, 2001, the last day of school for the senior class at Eastwood Secondary, a public school tucked near the edge of a sleepy Oregon town. That morning, the air was humid but clear, the sky soft and overcast, and the grounds were buzzing with anticipation. White folding chairs were already arranged in neat rows outside the main building. Families were arriving with cameras. Teachers stood near the auditorium, organizing gowns and handing out programs. It was a day meant for endings. Joyful ones. Inside the senior hall, 5 girls lingered a little longer than the rest. Haley Torres, the loudest of them, had already declared she'd cry once they tossed their caps. "I'm not hugging anyone sweaty," she warned, "so we better take all the nice pictures now." Nia Dorsey, soft-spoken and artistic, clutched her sketchpad to her chest like a shield. She didn't speak much, but her drawings said everything. There were pages filled with the 5 of them in different poses, backstage, at lockers, at lunch, walking the same path home every day since freshman year. Lena Khoury was the skeptic. "Don't get too sentimental," she said. "Half of these people won't remember each other in 3 months." Mara Ellison, dressed a little more formal than most, wore a delicate silver pendant and kept fixing her hair even though it already looked perfect. "I'll remember you all," she said quietly. "I already do. I think I always will." Joanna Vexley, the tallest and most protective, stood by the door, holding all their phones and bags like a bodyguard. "We need to get moving or we're going to miss the lineup," she said, trying to herd the others like usual. They were inseparable. That year, they'd spent most afternoons rehearsing for the school's final theater production, a local stage adaptation of The Children's Hour, a choice that had stirred quiet controversy. Air final rehearsal had wrapped up just a week earlier, but the energy still lingered in the air. That's what brought them all back to the auditorium that morning: nostalgia, nerves, and a private plan to say goodbye to the place that had held them together. They walked side by side through the corridor toward the backstage area, all 5 dressed in their graduation gowns, their caps tucked under their arms. No cameras followed them. No teachers questioned it. The hallway lights flickered once as they passed the trophy cabinet. They stopped just behind the stage curtain, whispering, laughing, arranging each other's tassels and adjusting pins. A janitor later said he saw them standing there, all 5 in a straight line, facing the mirror that hung on the wall backstage. They weren't talking anymore, just looking at their reflections. That was the last time anyone saw them. The ceremony began just before 11 o'clock a.m. Rows of students filed out of the school and into the seating area as music played from cheap speakers. Parents raised their cameras, teachers handed out programs, but 5 chairs near the center of the senior class remained empty. At first, nobody noticed. It was only when Principal Edmonds rose to call the student names alphabetically and skipped from Torres to Tully that murmurs began. "Where's Haley?" one girl whispered. "Lena's not here either," someone else muttered. Staff assumed they were running late or fixing something. A teacher jogged back inside to check. By noon, the ceremony had ended. The 5 girls never appeared. Their names were still printed in the program. Their diplomas sat on a table near the gym. By 12:30, their parents were panicking. Haley's mother was the first to break into tears. Joanna's father demanded the school be locked down. A group of friends retraced their steps from the hallway to the to the costume storage closet. Everything looked the same. Nothing was out of place. Not a single sign they had ever been there. By the time local police arrived, the auditorium was empty again. No sound, no witnesses, no cameras. 5 girls had vanished during their graduation, and the building, as if in mourning, closed its doors that evening and never reopened the East Wing again. The initial response was swift but confused. Within the first hour of realizing that the 5 girls were missing, the staff at Eastwood Secondary assumed it was a prank, or at worst, a rebellious stunt. It was graduation day, after all, and teenagers had been known to sneak off for their own private goodbyes. But by mid-afternoon, when neither friends nor family had heard a word from Haley, Nia, Lena, Mara, or Joanna, the tone shifted sharply from annoyance to fear. At 2:15 p.m., the police were officially notified. What followed was a search that appeared promising on the surface, but led nowhere. The building was swept room by room. Every classroom, supply closet, auditorium catwalk, and prop cage backstage was opened, cataloged, and cleared. Staff said the girls had walked behind the curtain, so officers started there. They found nothing. No bags, no hair ties, no lipstick stains on mirrors, no scuff marks, no signs of struggle. Their graduation robes were never found. Neither were their phones or their caps. Outside, the community assembled like a wave of instinct. Parents, students, neighbors. They came with flashlights, with dogs, with questions no one could answer. Local authorities called in state search and rescue units. K-9 dogs were brought in. The grounds were searched from the football field to the woods behind the East Wing. Helicopters circled overhead for days. The pond near the track was drained. Police stopped every car leaving the area that afternoon. The media arrived on day 2. By day 3, Eastwood had become the center of national headlines. Seniors vanished during graduation, no evidence found. Oregon town shaken by school disappearance. Who took the girls of Eastwood? But all the attention brought only pressure, not answers. The detectives interviewed every person who had been inside the school that day. Teachers, students, parents, janitorial staff. They examined the guest book at the front desk, hoping to find an unfamiliar name. They reviewed yearbooks, called in former students, investigated teachers' past records. There was no one with motive, no evidence of grooming, no notes, no messages. Not a single person had seen the girls after 10:48 a.m., the time the janitor had last spotted them near the auditorium curtain. By the end of the first week, all 5 families were pleading on camera. "If someone has them, just let them call," Haley's mother said, sobbing beside a missing poster. "They're not the kind of girls to run," said Joanna's father, his voice shaking with helplessness. "They were going to college in 2 months. They had plans," Mara's older sister said. "Someone took them." The police set up a dedicated hotline. Hundreds of calls poured in. Psychics, conspiracy theorists, false confessions, and neighbors with feelings. A few tips even said the girls had been seen at a gas station or riding bikes by the lake. But every lead dried up. There was no video, no receipts, no known vehicles. The girls had simply ceased to exist. Then came the first major internal error, and it shattered what trust the community had left. On day 12, the school admitted that not all of the security cameras had been recording. Most were non-functional due to outdated systems that had been marked for replacement, a project scheduled for that summer. The only working camera inside the auditorium foyer captured 2 teachers entering, but no one exiting. When pressed, the district spokesperson called it unfortunate. The town called it unforgivable. Tensions escalated. Protesters stood outside the school gates with candles. Rumors of a teacher cover-up spread. Online forums accused the school of human trafficking. A Facebook group formed overnight. #JusticeForThe5. Behind the scenes, the families began to turn on each other, not out of blame, but out of fear. Some clung to hope. Others accepted the worst. Some filed lawsuits. Others stopped leaving their homes. By October, 4 months after the disappearance, the case was officially labeled inactive but open. The police said it wasn't a cold case, yet, but the public knew better. Detective Harold Burns, the original lead investigator, gave one last statement before being reassigned. "What's troubling isn't just the lack of evidence. It's the lack of a crime scene. These girls didn't run away. They didn't fight back. They didn't scream. It's like something let them in and then didn't let them out." Years passed. The search slowed, then stopped. The East Wing of Eastwood Secondary, the auditorium, the storage tunnels, the backstage dressing rooms, was closed permanently in 2003 for maintenance. But no work ever started. The doors were sealed. The lights were shut off. The windows were blacked out. That part of the school became a place no one spoke of. Teachers avoided it. Students dared each other to knock on the doors. Nothing ever answered. By 2005, Eastwood had returned to routine, but 5 families never celebrated a graduation again. Eastwood was never the same after the girls vanished. The change didn't happen all at once, not like the sudden drop of sound when the curtain falls, but slowly, quietly, as if the town itself had absorbed the disappearance into its soil. By the spring of 2002, the community had stopped pretending it was okay. Graduation that year was canceled, not postponed, not moved. Canceled. Instead, the school held a reflection service in the gymnasium, where 5 empty chairs were placed on the stage, each draped with a white robe and a single candle flickering beside it. No one clapped. No photos were taken. A choir sang something somber and unrecognizable. Parents who had children graduating the following year began pulling them out of Eastwood. One by one, desks emptied. By 2004, enrollment had dropped by 31%. The class of 2001, the one that was supposed to celebrate a fresh start, a break into adulthood, never gathered again. No reunions were planned, no one updated their alumni pages, and the 5 missing girls, their profiles were frozen in time. Haley's quote had said, "I want to teach kids how to ask better questions." Lena's, "Don't underestimate the quiet ones." Mara had simply written, "I'll be back on this stage someday." Now, they were just captions beneath smiles no one could explain anymore. The auditorium, the last place they were seen, became a local legend. It was locked indefinitely. The lights inside never came back on. Rumors began to grow. Some students claimed you could still hear footsteps behind the curtain. Others said the door to the dressing room was nailed shut from the inside. A few whispered that the school board never let anyone investigate the tunnels beneath the stage. The janitor who had last seen the girls, Mr. Keene, retired within a year. Quiet man, no family, lived on the edge of town. After retirement, he was never seen again. A neighbor later told the paper that Keene had once confided something strange. "They weren't scared when they went in. That's what haunts me. They looked drawn in." But the town didn't want to be haunted. They wanted closure, and when no closure came, they chose silence instead. The 5 families reacted in 5 different ways. Haley's parents moved to Arizona within 6 months. They left everything behind. The house, the furniture, even Haley's childhood bike still locked to the backyard fence. Locals said they never came back for it. Lena's older brother took over the search efforts. For 3 years, he posted weekly on online forums. He ran a blog, requested FBI files, and interviewed alumni. But in 2005, the blog stopped updating. Nia's mother still visited the school every Sunday. She brought flowers and tucked them into the metal grates of the auditorium's west door. One year, someone left a note behind them. It said only, "You're looking in the wrong place." Mara's father sued the school district. The case dragged on for 2 years before settling quietly. The amount was never disclosed. Neither was the settlement reason. And Joanna's twin brother, Caleb, dropped out of college in 2002. He left a note in his dorm room that read, "I still hear her. I'm going back." No one knows what "back" meant. He was never seen again either. By 2006, Eastwood Secondary changed its name. The sign was repainted to read, West Hill Academy. The yearbooks, transcripts, and school branding followed suit. No one at the school used the name Eastwood anymore. It was a form of erasure, subtle, administrative, but intentional. And yet, the town couldn't forget. Not really. Every June, when graduation season returned, the air would turn heavy again. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Teachers requested time off. Police cruisers lingered near the school, watching the closed auditorium doors as if expecting them to open on their own. In 2008, a journalist named Karen Delaney arrived in town. She had grown up 2 counties over, but had followed the case since she was a teenager. Her goal wasn't sensationalism, it was documentation. She wanted to understand how a town lives with an open wound. Karen spent months interviewing teachers, parents, local store owners. Most didn't want to speak. Some refused to even say the girls' names. But a few whispered something strange. One teacher, retired, said, "The girls used to whisper things backstage. I thought it was just drama kid stuff, but they talked about voices, about doors they weren't supposed to find." A former stage crew member claimed there were ladders behind the costume wall, but if you climbed down too far, it got cold. And the air changed. Another, a girl who had been 1 grade below the missing 5, swore she saw a light flicker from beneath the stage the day after they vanished. She told her teacher. The teacher told her not to speak of it again. Karen's findings were compiled into a podcast called Vanished at the Velvet Line. It never made national headlines, but it developed a cult following, especially for one particular episode, the storage room interview. That episode featured audio from a retired maintenance worker who requested anonymity. His voice was low, gravelly, and shaken. The old tunnels weren't on any blueprint. I only found them by accident. They didn't lead anywhere at first, just walls. But there was one night, back in 1999, I swear I heard laughter down there. Not loud, like something playing pretend. Karen tried to investigate the tunnels herself, but the school refused access. Still, her podcast planted a seed. In 2013, just before the 13th anniversary of the disappearance, someone posted a message anonymously on a message board dedicated to cold cases. There is footage. The camera wasn't dead. It was hidden in the lights. No one took it seriously, until 6 months later, when it was found. It began with a rumor. An anonymous comment posted to a long-forgotten thread on a cold case forum. A user named The Velvet Witness simply wrote, "There is footage. The camera wasn't dead. It was hidden in the lights." At first, no one paid attention. The case had been cold for over a decade. The internet was littered with people chasing ghosts. But then a retired lighting technician, Glenn McKay, came forward, reluctantly. Glenn had worked at Eastwood Secondary in the early 2000s. He was responsible for the stage rigging and lighting in the auditorium, and after the building's closure, he was one of the few allowed inside for decommission, inventory. He hadn't thought much of the forum post, until he remembered something. One of the lights, high above the stage, buried in the catwalk trusses, wasn't on any of the school's maintenance logs. Glenn had always assumed it was a dummy fixture, but now, years later, the memory came back sharper than it had any right to. He contacted Detective Ellen Marks, who had taken over the case in 2011 when the cold case unit reopened several of Oregon's most disturbing unsolved disappearances. Within a week, a warrant was issued. On a rainy Tuesday in November 2014, for the first time in over a decade, the auditorium doors were unsealed. Dust choked the air. The floorboards groaned with age. Mold patterned the velvet curtains like rotting lace. A small team of forensics officers, a film technician, and Detective Marks entered the backstage area, climbing to the highest metal rafters above the main stage. It was there, wedged behind a rusted spotlight housing, that they found it. A small, boxy VHS surveillance camera, one that had never been connected to the main security system. It had its own power supply, its own internal tape. It had been recording independently, untouched, for hours on the day the girls vanished, and it had never been reviewed. The casing was sticky with time. The lens, though cracked, had enough clarity to make out movement. They brought the tape back to the lab. What they saw changed everything. The footage began at 10:42 a.m., 6 minutes before the girls were last seen. The quality was poor, washed in grayscale static, but the figures were identifiable. Haley, Naya, Lena, Mara, and Joanna entered from stage left, giggling and chatting. They were in their graduation gowns, holding their caps in their hands. They didn't look afraid. They didn't seem aware of any threat. The camera, positioned above the stage, captured them from an angle slightly behind and above, like a bird watching from the rafters. The girls moved toward the curtain, parted it, and stepped into the shadows of the stars. Was he backstage? Then something strange happened. They didn't walk into the dressing room. Instead, they stopped, all five, and turned at the same moment, looking toward something off-screen near the far left wing. Their posture shifted, their bodies stiffened, and then they smiled. One by one, the way someone might smile at an old friend or a beloved parent. But there was no one else visible. The audio was faint, but in the background a sound could be heard. A melody, out of tune, soft, like an old lullaby being hummed from a great distance. The notes repeated, unnatural, mechanical. Haley stepped forward first, then Lena. The others followed slowly, as if pulled. Their faces held no fear, just calm and a kind of quiet expectancy. Then they exited frame toward the wall at the back of the stage. But there's no door there, not in any blueprint, not in any inspection report. They simply vanished off camera, walking straight toward what should have been a wall of concrete and plaster. The video continued for another hour. No one returned. No one else entered. Just that song, echoing faintly, looping in the static. Detective Marks paused the tape. The room was silent. No one spoke. No screams, no violence, no shadowy figure. Just 5 girls, drawn by something unseen, walking toward a space that should not have existed, and smiling as they went. The video was not released to the public, but word spread. A leak in the coroner's office claimed the footage was deeply unsettling and raised more questions than it answered. The families were shown the tape in private. Several couldn't finish watching. One parent reportedly collapsed afterward and was hospitalized for panic-induced arrhythmia. The FBI became involved. So did state authorities. They returned to the auditorium with ground-penetrating radar. They knocked down walls. They dug beneath the stage. They found nothing. No trapdoor, no secret tunnel, just concrete, dust, and decades of silence. And yet, the tape existed. One expert suggested the camera might have been tampered with, that the footage could have been staged, but a forensic video analyst confirmed the audio track matched the ambient frequency of the building, including air vent hums, electrical hiss, and light fixture buzz, all consistent with natural capture. The footage was real, but what it showed wasn't possible. In the weeks following the discovery, Eastwood's legend became myth. Podcasts revisited the story. Internet forums exploded with theories. The girls were hypnotized. The melody was a signal, some kind of frequency trigger. The school was built over something ancient. The auditorium wasn't just a room, it was a threshold. Some said the camera hadn't recorded an event, it had recorded a choice. But if that were true, who, or what, had given them the option? And why had they all accepted? Detective Marks submitted a final report to the Bureau 3 months later. The final line read, "There is no explanation that fits within the known parameters of our world, but 5 girls walk somewhere we cannot see, and we should ask why they were smiling when they did." 13 years after they disappeared, the town had what it asked for, answers. But no one felt closure, only more fear. Because the real horror wasn't that the girls were taken. It was that they may have gone willingly, and whatever called to them might not be finished yet. Her name was Eliza Rourke, and for 13 years she had never spoken a word about that day. She wasn't a friend exactly, more like a quiet fixture on the edges of the girls' world, not popular, not ignored, just there. She'd sat 2 rows behind them in homeroom, shared gym class, had biology with Joanna. No one remembered her in the early days of the investigation. Her name wasn't mentioned in the papers. She wasn't interviewed, not once. Her yet. Our book photo had no senior quote. But Eliza had been in the auditorium that morning, and she'd seen something. She'd kept it buried so deep that even she had convinced herself it hadn't mattered. Until she heard the audio from the tape in January of 2015, just months after the hidden footage surfaced. Eliza sent a handwritten letter to Detective Marks. No return address, just a message. "I was there. I think I was supposed to go too. But I didn't." It took authorities 2 weeks to track her down. She had changed cities, changed her last name, and never once spoke about Eastwood. She worked nights cleaning a hospital, lived alone, no social media, no phone listed. When they found her, she didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just sat down across from the detective and said, "I thought I had more time." What followed was one of the most haunting testimonies ever recorded in the investigation. Eliza had been in the dressing room behind the stage on the morning of graduation, trying to fix a rip in the hem of her gown. She wasn't close with the others. They were beautiful, bold, inseparable. She admired them from a distance, but she knew who they were. Everyone did. At 10:30 a.m. she heard them enter the stage area. They were laughing. Haley's laugh, high and clear, led the chorus. Eliza froze, hoping they wouldn't come in and find her awkwardly crouched on the floor with a sewing kit. But the girls didn't open the dressing room door. They stayed in the wings. Then the laughter stopped. Eliza heard a soft humming. At first she thought it was feedback from the speakers, but it was more melodic, like something trying to remember a song it had forgotten long ago. That's when she heard Haley whisper, "There it is again. You hear it, right?" Then silence. Eliza peeked through a small slit in the dressing room curtain. What she saw never left her. The 5 girls were standing at the far end of the stage, all staring in the same direction. Their faces were slack, not blank, but serene, like they'd just heard something only they understood. Lena whispered something to Mara, and they both smiled. Then one by one, they moved behind the curtain, toward the back wall. Joanna turned last. Eliza remembered it clearly. Joanna looked over her shoulder and said, "It's okay, we're not alone." And then, they were gone. Eliza didn't follow. She wanted to. She felt pulled. But something rooted her in place, something low and animal in her gut that screamed not to move. "I think it was calling to me too," she told Detective Marks. "But I wasn't ready, or I wasn't wanted. I don't know which is worse." After that day, Eliza had nightmares. Not of the girls, but of the sound. That lullaby, fractured, gentle, repeating endlessly. In some dreams, she was standing in the auditorium, alone. In others, she was back behind the curtain, watching the wall open like a mouth. She never went back to the school. She never told her parents. Instead, she packed her things and left town that fall. "I've been waiting for it to come back," she said, "for the pull to return." Detective Marks asked her what she thought it was. Eliza didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she said, "Something old, something waiting, and it chose them first." Her testimony raised questions. Why hadn't anyone else heard the humming? Why had no forensic scans revealed any structural irregularities in the wall the girls approached? Why did Eliza seem more relieved than terrified to finally speak? Some officers dismissed her as emotionally disturbed, but Detective Marks believed her, especially when Eliza asked something strange. "Did the camera catch everything?" Detective Marks hesitated. "Why?" Eliza looked down at her hands and said, "Because I think there was something else in the frame, just for a second. A shape, watching from the rafters." When the tape was reviewed again, frame by frame, the technician confirmed it. At exactly 10:43:07, 2 seconds after Mara exits frame, a shadow moves across the far wall. It doesn't resemble any of the girls. It's tall. It lingers. And then it's gone. Just one frame. Just enough to feel wrong. Eliza asked not to be contacted again. She declined witness protection, therapy, press interviews. She left quietly. But before she did, she gave the detective one last thing. A drawing. Childlike. Crude. It showed 5 stick figures holding hands, facing a black rectangle. Behind them, a smaller figure stood with its back turned. Alone. Above the rectangle, a single word was written in jagged, looping letters. Welcome. To this day, Eliza's fate remains unknown. Some believe she vanished years later, after leaving a final voicemail for Detective Marks that said, "It's calling again." Others believe she fabricated her story for attention, that the trauma of that day manifested into fiction. But those who've heard the recording, especially those who grew up in Eastwood, say the same thing. The humming in the background wasn't part of the message. It was something else entirely. The wall behind the Eastwood Auditorium stage had always been considered just that, a wall, made of concrete blocks, slathered in chipped black paint, partially hidden by thick velvet curtains. No door, no hinges, no visible seams. But after Eliza Rourke's statement, after the tape revealed 5 girls calmly walking toward it, then vanishing, the assumption of permanence was no longer safe. The FBI's forensic architecture team arrived in late February 2015. Their mission, to deconstruct the stage area completely, brick by brick if necessary. The school board gave full permission. The auditorium had already become a local myth. There was no going back. Detective Ellen Marks was there the day they started. She stood in the empty seats, arms folded tight, watching as men in reflective vests and hard hats used drills and hammers to peel away the decades of concrete and paint. The back wall, however, refused to cooperate. It wasn't just hard to break. It was different. The material beneath the surface wasn't standard cinder block. It was something else. Denser, smoother, almost warm to the touch. A forensic analyst took a sample to a nearby lab. The preliminary results were baffling. Not concrete, not metal, not wood. It contained organic traces, bone calcium, plant material, something old, something crafted, but not by modern hands. By the end of the first day, a 10-foot section had been carefully cleared. That's when they saw it. A seam, not a door, not quite. Just a perfectly straight vertical line, nearly invisible unless the light hit it at the right angle. Detective Marks leaned in, her breath catching. The seam had something carved along its length. Tiny etchings, symbols that didn't match any known language but looked disturbingly similar to markings found in Lena's missing person journal, recovered from her locker 13 years earlier. The same spiral, the same triangle within a circle, the same phrase written again and again on the final page. We're not ending, we're beginning. The FBI brought in anthropologists, historians, linguists. No one could place the symbols. They weren't Native American, nor Norse, nor occult, but they felt familiar, like echoes of a forgotten alphabet. One researcher described them as pre-linguistic cues, shapes that triggered emotion before understanding. Fear, nostalgia, obedience. On the third day of the dig, a technician named Mel Alvarez pressed his hand flat against the seam, just a gesture of curiosity. The seam gave way, silently, smoothly. The material folded inward like silk, revealing a passage. No hinges, no sound, just air. Cold, heavy, dry as dust. The workers froze. No one moved. Detective Marks radioed for the team to halt all activity. A hazmat crew was dispatched. Sensors were lowered into the open. No radiation, no toxins, no biological hazards. Just one strange reading, a persistent electromagnetic hum, too low for the human ear, unless amplified. When the audio was boosted in the lab, it matched the humming from the tape. They called it the passage. The hallway was narrow, only wide enough for one person at a time. The walls were the same smooth, unknown substance. No light fixtures, no wires. Yet the passage glowed faintly. It extended straight for about 15 feet before turning sharply to the left, vanishing from sight. A drone was sent in first. It lost signal halfway down. A second, tethered with a cable, sent back shaky footage, a small chamber beyond the bend. Inside, a mirror. Floor to ceiling, perfectly clean. Nothing else. Just a mirror, and 5 objects placed neatly on the floor in front of it. The objects were retrieved with extreme caution. Each one matched something from the missing girls. A charm bracelet with Joanna's initials, Haley's red graduation sash, a pair of ballet flats Lena was last seen wearing, a half-used stick of blue lip balm, Mara's favorite, and a small photograph. Nia, holding her dog, age 9. Each item was dusted, swabbed, tested. No fingerprints, no dust, no decay, as if they'd been placed there yesterday. But DNA confirmed the truth. They belonged to the girls. No doubt, Detective Marks requested a full psychological analysis of the mirror. It seemed absurd, but she'd learned to follow instinct. The results were inconclusive. No tricks, no illusions. But those who looked into it didn't like to describe what they saw. One technician, hardened by years of trauma scene work, refused to go near it again. "I saw something behind me," he whispered. "Not in the room, in the reflection. Watching." The mirror was removed and placed in storage, but for weeks afterward, those who work at the site reported strange symptoms. Vivid dreams of open doors in dark fields, earaches that pulsed with rhythm, a sensation of being watched at all times. Eventually, the entire stage was sealed. The hallway reburied. The entrance, bricked over. Not to destroy it, just to contain it. To this day, no one has explained what the wall truly was. A relic? A trap? A portal? But one thing became clear. The girls hadn't been taken. They had walked through, together, smiling, and they had left something behind. Not just objects, but a door, a question, and perhaps an invitation. The town tried to move on, but every so often, especially near graduation, someone breaks into the school, some urban explorer or thrill seeker, and they always say the same thing when they come back. I heard something, I don't know how, but I did. The same melody, the same humming, still playing, still waiting. Summer faded into fall, but the tension in Eastwood didn't settle. The town had become quieter. Not the good kind of quiet, but the kind that hums beneath your skin. The kind that makes streetlights feel dimmer, neighbors feel distant, and sounds at night feel a bit too sharp. After the discovery of the hidden hallway and the personal objects, Eastwood High shut down the auditorium indefinitely. Classes were rerouted. Staff moved their offices. The area was sealed off, though unofficially. The town council refused to acknowledge it publicly. But teenagers talked. Photos leaked. Rumors grew. They called it the Mirror Room and dared each other to sneak in. On October 9, 2015, a Friday night, 2 seniors went missing. Their names were Callie Hart and Ezra Dale, best friends, drama club regulars, bright futures ahead. They had planned to film a short documentary, Urban Legends of Eastwood, for a college application. According to their classmates, they were last seen carrying cameras and flashlights, heading into the locked auditorium through a side door they had learned to pick. They never came out. When their absence was reported the next morning, police swept the school. Nothing was out of place, except for the door behind the stage. The sealed bricks? Broken from the inside. Again, there were no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, just a flashlight on the ground, and a sticky note taped to the wall where the mirror had once stood. We're still listening. Callie and Ezra's footage was recovered from their abandoned equipment. The first 10 minutes were typical: laughter, whispers, shaky camera work. They joked about ghosts, about the missing girls, about finally seeing it for ourselves. Then came the humming. They didn't hear it at first, but the audio picked it up. A slow, tonal vibration that grew steadily louder. Callie turned to Ezra and asked, "Do you feel that?" He nodded. "It's in my chest." Then something strange happened. The camera caught both of them going completely still, not frightened, not panicked, just transfixed. The light of their flashlights narrowed toward the exposed wall. The camera dropped. The last frame was static, but just before the screen cut out, one word whispered so faintly it had to be amplified to be heard: "Welcome back." The town broke after that. There's no better word for it. Parents pulled their kids from school. Reporters flooded in. The mirror was blamed, then denied. The hallway was filled in again, this time with concrete and steel. The entire building was condemned 2 weeks later, but it didn't matter. Something had already opened, and it wasn't just in Eastwood. In December, Detective Marks received a letter from a retired theater director in New Hampshire. It was short, typed, no return address. "We had something like this in '86, 3 girls, also during rehearsal. One wrote, 'The song is inside now, on the mirror before she vanished. No one believed me. Don't make the same mistake.'" The note was signed with a single initial, W. It was the first of many letters, from Florida, from Michigan, even from overseas. Whispers of similar vanishings, always 5, always girls, always near a stage or a mirror. In each case, no bodies, just one message left behind. We are not ending. We are not afraid. We're already through. Back in Eastwood, Detective Marks met again with Eliza Rourke. She had reappeared in late November, after nearly 3 months in hiding. She looked thinner, worn down, but more lucid than before. She had come to offer a theory. "It's a pattern," she said, "and we're just seeing a sliver of it." Eliza believed the mirror wasn't just a symbolic portal, but a conduit. She had started seeing reflections in glass where none should have existed. Polished metal, still water, the backs of spoons. She said, "They're rehearsing, Detective, still." When asked to explain, Eliza said only this: "They're trying to remember how to be us, and they're almost perfect now." Around Christmas, another event occurred. A janitor working in a nearby town, 40 miles from Eastwood, claimed to see 5 girls walking single file across the high school's soccer field. He thought they were part of a midnight rehearsal, but when he approached, they vanished into the shadows. All he could say was, "They didn't move like people. They moved like memory." Security footage from the school showed nothing. But at 3:33 a.m. that night, the field's floodlights flickered on by themselves for exactly 7 seconds, just long enough to cast 5 distinct shadows. Public pressure mounted to demolish the auditorium entirely. The mayor resisted, citing historic value and lack of evidence. But one morning in February 2016, the choice was taken out of their hands. An electrical fire started beneath the stage. By the time fire trucks arrived, half the building was gone. Inside the charred remains, investigators found no bodies, just a small pile of ash in the shape of 5 standing figures, perfectly spaced, and in the far corner, untouched by flame, a blackened square of mirror glass. No reflection. But when held at a specific angle, it showed this: 5 girls, standing in a line. Only one looked at the viewer. Her eyes were completely black. In the years that followed, Eastwood High was never rebuilt. The lot where the auditorium once stood remains empty, overgrown now, with moss climbing the rusted fence and weeds pushing through cracked pavement. No one ever landscaped it. No one ever dared. Locals avoid it. Children walk faster when passing by. Even birds seem to fly higher overhead, steering clear of the silence that seems to gather there. The town calls it the Quiet Block. No one says why, but everyone knows. Something ended there, or maybe it began. Detective Ellen Marks never took another case after Eastwood. She moved to a small town in northern Vermont, near the edge of a frozen lake. She lives alone, keeps no mirrors in the house. People say she's kind, but distant, a regular at the town library, where she checks out history books more than crime thrillers now. She once told a neighbor over tea, "Some stories don't end, they just stop asking for your attention." Her last written report on the case was never published, but it was left, unmarked, in a box at the Eastwood Historical Society, a quiet handwritten note on top. They didn't disappear, they rehearsed. As for the families of Joanna, Mara, Haley, Nia, and Lena, each took a different path. Nia's mother moved to the coast, remarried quietly, never spoke her daughter's name again. Joanna's father kept the stage photo framed above the fireplace, the one taken minutes before the ceremony, with all 5 girls smiling. He refused to believe she was gone. "She's just not done performing yet," he'd say. "She'll take her bow when she's ready." Mara's brother became a teacher. He never spoke publicly about what happened, but every year, it's on May 22nd, the day of the graduation, he lights 5 candles in a row. He never explains why. Haley's older sister started a support group for families of the missing. It still meets once a month. Sometimes no one speaks. They just sit and wait, as if expecting someone to walk through the door and say, "Sorry I'm late. The show ran long." Lena's mother stopped speaking altogether. She lives in the same house with the same floral wallpaper. Neighbors leave food at the door. A porch light is always left on. Always. In 2019, construction crews attempted to repave the road behind the old school lot. Their machines broke. 2 in a row, not from rust, not from weather. They simply stopped. Workers said the asphalt felt wrong. One described it as soft, like skin. Another refused to return, saying she heard music under her boots. She described it as humming. A low tone. Familiar. In 2021, a teenage boy dared his friends to break into the abandoned locker room next to the old school gym. They agreed, filming the whole thing for social media. At first, it was just cobwebs and mold, old basketball shoes, rotting benches. Then they found a mirror, cracked, dusty, propped against the wall. One boy wiped it clean. What they saw made them drop the phone. There were 5 girls behind them. No reflections. Just the girls. Standing in the mirror, perfectly still. But one of them smiled. The video went viral for 48 hours before being pulled from every platform. No explanation, no official source cited. But anyone who saw it remembered the last frame. Not the girls, not the mirror, but the text, scratched faintly across the glass. We remember who watched. In 2022, the 5th and final object from the mirror room was returned anonymously to the Eastwood Historical Society. The red graduation sash, folded perfectly, no dust, no DNA, just a note attached with a safety pin. We came back for rehearsal. We're almost ready now. The building no longer exists. But people say that on quiet nights, especially near graduates, tie-in season, if you stand at the edge of the lot and face the wind, you might hear it again. Not screams, not voices, just the low, rhythmic hum, like 5 voices in harmony, practicing, waiting. The story of the 5 girls was never added to any national database of the missing. No official cold case file exists under their names. No further investigation is ongoing. It's as if the system itself decided to forget. But not everyone did. There's a bench now at the town park. No names, no plaque, just a carved phrase across the backrest. Some curtains close from the inside. And sometimes, when the breeze is just right, when the shadows fall a certain way, and the sky turns the same soft purple as it did on that night in May of 2001, you can feel them there, just behind the curtain, just out of view, still rehearsing.